Secure Synopsis, 12th May 2021, General Studies. Modern Indian history from about the middle of the 18th century until the present, significant events, personalities, and issues. Let's have a look at the questions here. Account for the contributions of Gopal Krishna Gokhale as a social reformer and educationalist of modern India. Gopal Krishna Gokhale, born on May 9th, 1866, was a renowned social reformer of India and was one of the leaders of the moderate bloc of the Indian National Congress. And he was known to be the Mahatma Gandhi's political mentor. In 1889, Gokhale joined the INC motivated by his mentor, social reformer M.G. Ranade. He fought along with a host of other leaders and reformers for political rights for the Indian people. He was a moderate. He did not believe the radical demands altogether and wished for peaceful and non confrontationist methods to acquire rights and privileges for the government. This is where he came into conflict with the extremist faction of the INC, especially Bal Gangadhar Tilak. He was elected as honorary secretary of the Sarvajanik Sabha, Pune in 1890. In 1893, Gokhale became the secretary of the Bombay Provincial Conference, and 1895 he served as the joint secretary of the INC along with Tilak. Gokhale believed in working with the colonial government to bring about social reforms in India. He was voted to the Legislative Council of Bombay in 1899 and also to the Governor General's Imperial Council in 1901. Contributions of Gopal Krishna Gokhale as a social reformer and educationalist. Gopal Krishna Gokhale, the liberal leader of Indian National Congress, founded the Servants of India Society in 1905. The aim of the society was to train national missionaries for the service of India, to promote by all constitutional means the true interests of the Indian people, and to prepare a cadre of selfless workers who were to devote their lives to the cause of the country in a religious spirit. He wanted Indians to receive an education that would instill in them a civic and patriotic sense of duty. As part of the society's activities, he arranged mobile libraries and schools. He also gave night classes to industrial workers. He was a renowned economist, and his speech on a budget in the Central Legislative Council portrayed his sound and thorough statistical skills. Gopal Krishna Gokhale played a major role in the Morley Minto reforms. In 1908, Gokhale founded the Ranade Institutions of Economics. He discouraged the untouchability and caste system, pleaded for the liberation of women, and supported the cause of female education. Gokhale visited Mahatma Gandhi in South Africa in 1912 on the latter's request. He famously mentored the father of the nation, who returned to India at Gokhale's request. In India, Gokhale toured the whole country, mobilizing public opinion in support of the Indians in South Africa. Gokhale put to constructive use the opportunity to debate in the councils by demanding universal primary education, attacking repressive policies, and drawing attention to the plight of the indentured labor and Indian workers in South Africa. Let's conclude it. Gokhale's involvement in a wide range of public and legislative bodies and his commitment to the advancement of education strained him physically. Excessive exertion and the resulting exhaustion aggravated his diabetes and cardiac asthma. The end came peacefully and the great humanitarian leader passed away on Feb 19th, 1915 in Pune. General Studies 2, topic GS2, government policies and interventions for the development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation. Inclusive growth and issues arising from it. Explain the challenges in accelerating digital financial inclusion in India and provide recommendations for making digital services accessible to citizens. The COVID-19 pandemic has alerted us all to the fragility of cash and the resilience of digital technologies, including digital payments. Even the restrictions, commerce needed to be continued to fulfill basic livelihood needs, and it was digital technologies that made it possible. Now, more than ever, the power of brick and mortar distribution channels must parallel in the digital world. India is seeing increasing digitization of financial services with consumers shifting from cash to cards, wallets, apps, and UPI. UPI transactions reached about 3.3 trillion rupees in September 2020, growing at nearly 100% year on year. Challenges of digital financial inclusion in India are: it lies at the heart of financial inclusion in India. Despite the government's efforts to create interconnected digital infrastructure, the adoption of DFS in rural areas is marred by digital illiteracy, which has a direct bearing on the acceptance of digital products. The lack of trust in technology, inability to use smartphones, and poor network connectivity restrict digital transactions and discourage people with low digital proficiency from using e bank services. As a result, cash is still the preferred mode of payment in rural India. Financial inclusion does not depend only on the digital capabilities of rural customers, but also on the ease with which they can carry out transactions online or on their phones. The absence of financial products and services suited to the rural masses remains a challenge in digital financial inclusion. Products have to be designed in a way that they are both easy to understand and operate. Language is another factor. Banks and fintechs must necessarily integrate local languages into their products so that the users have little trouble accessing them. Means of accelerating digital financial inclusions in India are acceleration of digital financial inclusion for undeserved sections of Indian society, enabling SMEs to get paid, that is subject matter experts to get paid, get capital, and get digital and access customers and ensure their continued resilience. Policy and technological interventions to foster trust and increase cyber resilience, unlocking the promise of digitization in India's agriculture sector, strengthening the payment infrastructure to promote a level playing field for the NBFCs and banks, digitizing registration and compliance processes, and diversifying credit sources to enable growth opportunities for MSMEs. Building information sharing systems, including a fraud repository, and ensuring that online digital commerce platforms carry warnings to alert consumers to the risk of frauds. Enabling agricultural NBFCs to access low cost capital and deploy a phygital model for achieving better long term digital consumer outcomes. Digitizing land records will also provide a major boost to the sector. The adoption of digital payment platforms and mobile apps can be driven by hyper-localization and addressing the pain points of switching from cash-based transaction mode to digitized services. Multilingual options will also help develop a more inclusive model. Public and private entities can support local innovators who are more clued into regional demands and collaborate with them on products that suit local needs. For example, the lack of documents has been the biggest deterrent in weaning rural customers away from the traditional banking services. However, Aadhaar enabled payment system helped address this issue. To make city transit seamlessly accessible to all with minimal crowding and queues, leveraging existing smartphones and contactless cards, and aim for an inclusive, interoperable, and fully open system such as that of the London Tube. In the past years, India has changed its operating landscape in making digital more accessible and friction free. It is one of the most advanced digital payments environment in the world. Now is the time to take our learnings and digital transformation at scale with speed and agility. Let's have a look at the issues relating to development and management of social sector services relating to health, education, and human resources. The urgency to save lives in the pandemic is pushing doctors to prescribe a mix of drugs which may drive the world into the hidden pandemic of antimicrobial resistance. Critically examine. Healthcare systems across the world have been stretched thin by the unprecedented demands that the COVID-19 pandemic has exerted. Once again, India has found itself at a critical juncture in its fight against the virus as it battles a second wave of infections. While efforts are doubled up, it is crucial to assess the impact of these response measures on antimicrobial resistance. AMR, the development of antimicrobial resistance capacities in infection causing pathogens, has been widely recognized as one of the most serious health threats and will likely cause the next pandemic. Antimicrobial resistance is the ability of a microorganisms like bacteria, viruses, and some parasites to stop an antimicrobial such as antibiotics, antivirals, and antimalarials from working against it. As a result, standard treatments become ineffective, infectious persist, and may spread to others. Pandemic and antimicrobial resistance. Beyond the ongoing pandemic as well, indiscriminate prescription of antibiotics by healthcare professionals and their availability without prescriptions from pharmacies in the absence of accurate diagnostic tests plays a significant role in increasing antibiotic resistance. It is well documented from studies carried out in India that the antibiotics are prescribed the most for treating upper tract respiratory infections, which are most of the time of viral etiology, are self-limiting and do not require treatment with antibiotics. Other causes of antimicrobial resistance. Antibiotic resistance can occurs naturally, but misuse of antibiotics in humans and animals is accelerating the process. Poor infection prevention and control further accelerate it. While in humans, antibiotics are primarily used for treating patients, they are used as growth promoters in animals, often because they offer economic shortcuts that can place hygienic practices. In their quest for survival and propagation, common bugs develop a variety of mechanisms to develop antimicrobial resistance. The indiscriminate use of antibiotics is the greatest driver in selection and propagation of resistant bugs. It has the potential to make fatal even minor infections. Wrong diagnosis. Doctors sometimes prescribe antimicrobials just in case, or they prescribe broad spectrum antimicrobials when a specific drug would be more suitable. Using these medications in this way it increases the risk of AMR. Inappropriate use. If a person does not complete a course of antimicrobial drugs, some microbes may survive and develop resistance to the drug. Also, antibiotics recommended by quacks or pharmacists contribute to magnify the issue. Measures being taken. The World Health Organization is also contributing or coordinating a global campaign, Handle with Care, to raise awareness and encourage best practices for antibiotic use. In India, the government has launched an action plan on antimicrobial resistance as well. India's NAP, National Action Plan to combat antimicrobial resistance, goes hand in hand with the World Health Organization's Global Action Plan for AMR. The Union Health Ministry's antimicrobial resistance awareness campaign urges people not to use medicines marked with a red vertical line, including antibiotics, without a doctor's prescription. In 2012, India's medical societies adopted the Chennai Declaration, a set of national recommendations to promote antibiotic stewardship. The government has also capped the maximum levels of drugs that can be used for growth promotion in meat and meat products. On July 19, 2019, the central government banned the manufacture, sale, and distribution of colistin and its formulation for food producing animals, poultry, aqua farming, and animal feed supplements with immediate effect to prevent AMR. While expanding the scope of antimicrobial stewardship to the entire health sector, stewardship programs should also be adopted quickly and voluntarily across sectors to encourage responsible practices. At a time that infectious diseases have shown their might, we need systems in place that recognize early warnings and respond effectively through sustainable practices and collaboration. General Studies 3, Conservation, Environment Pollution and Degradation and Environmental Impact Assessment. What is the Greater Nicobar Development Plan? Discuss. So, Niti Ayog's Greater Nicobar Development Plan aims to promote holistic development of Greater Nicobar. Based on that, the Standing Committee of the National Board for Wildlife denotified the entire Galathea Bay Wildlife Sanctuary for building port and other related infrastructure. Greater Nicobar Development Plan. The overall Greater Nicobar Development Plan envisages the use of about 244 square kilometers region for development purposes. Phase 1 of the plan includes below projects to construct 22 square kilometers airport complex, transshipment port at South Bay, and parallel to the coast, a mass rapid transport system, and free trade zone and warehousing complex on the southwestern coast. Finally, Andaman and Nicobar Islands Integrated Development Corporation will be the nodal agency for the implementation of the Greater Nicobar Development Plan. The Environment Appraisal Committee, Infrastructure 1 of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, has flagged serious concerns about Niti Ayog's ambitious project. Concerns associated with the plan, trees to be felled, which means the committee also noted that there are no details of the trees to be felled, a number that could run into millions since 130 square kilometers of the project area has some of the finest tropical forests in India. Threat to fauna. Any construction in the region threatens the survival of certain important organisms. The beaches at the mouth of the river Galathea in South Bay are among the most prominent nesting sites of giant leatherback turtles. Similarly, 90% of the Nicobar megapods nesting sites are within a distance of 30 meters from shore. Geological vulnerability. Andaman and Nicobar Islands are located in seismic zone 5. Further, the Andaman and Nicobar observe frequent storms and cyclones. This can easily destroy constructed structures. For instance, in 2004, tsunami caused a 3 to 4 meter land subsidence. This is the reason for the submergence of lighthouse located at Indra Point. Biodiversity. The Galathea Bay Wildlife Sanctuary forms part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, so preservation of this pristine biodiversity is an international obligation of India. Information deficit. The rational process of creation and other relevant provisions of the plan are still not publicly available. Ecological surveys in the last few years have reported a number of new species, many restricted to just the Galathea region. These include the critically endangered Nicobar shrew, the Great Nicobar crake, the Nicobar frog, the Nicobar cat snake, a new skink, a new lizard, snake of the Lycodon, especially that is yet to be described. What's the way forward? There is a need for independent assessment of terrestrial and marine biodiversity to rightly determine the impact. A study on the impact of dredging, reclamation, and port operations, including oil spills, to be carried out by nationally recognized institutions such as Wildlife Institute of India, ISC, or the Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History is required before proceeding. There is a need for studies of alternative sites for the port with a focus on environmental and ecological impact, especially on turtles and analysis of risk handling capabilities. Government policies and interventions for development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation. This is about mostly environment. Discuss the emerging issues in biomedical waste management due to COVID 19. What will be the challenges in waste management before the world owing to it? The worsening pandemic scenario has resulted in a massive spike in biomedical waste generated in India. In response to the COVID 19 pandemic in India, Central Pollution Control Board, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate, has published guidelines for the management of waste generated during treatment, diagnosis, quarantine of COVID 19 patients. If waste management is not given due importance, the crisis may amplify and lead to more transmission and contamination of public spaces. Issues related to biomedical waste generation, health risk. This waste has created a new biomedical waste crisis, posing a health risk to sanitation and garbage collectors. Example, over 40 sanitation workers have tested COVID positive and 15 have lost their lives in Delhi. Lack of segregation. Municipalities pick up COVID 19 biomedical waste from houses, but it is often has other household waste mixed in it. This decreases the efficiency of the incinerators at waste treatment plants as it results in greater emissions and unburnt ash. Large volume of waste generated. Before the COVID 19 outbreak, there was 500 grams of biomedical waste per bed daily. Now it is between 2.5 kg to 4 kg per bed. And a large COVID 19 facility can generate 800 to 2200 kg of biomedical waste per day. Overburden disposal capacity. PPE are being used everywhere from hotels to hospitals, railway stations to airports, crematoriums to burial grounds, so that the disposal mechanisms available in the city are not equipped to deal with this huge volume. Investments in incinerators is also a problem, as the infection is episodic. The machines may not be useful once cases start decreasing. Key guidelines for COVID 19 biomedical waste management. Procedure of disposal. The biomedical waste must be segregated in colored bags, that is yellow, red, white, and blue. According to the category of the waste, it can be stored up until 48 hours, after which it is either needed to be treated at in situ site or collected by the worker by CBMWTF. Collection and segregation of waste. Use dedicated trolleys and collection bins in COVID 19 isolation wards and label COVID 19 waste to be pasted on these items. Depute dedicated sanitation workers separately for biomedical waste. So, transportation and disposal of waste. COVID 19 garbage is collected and taken in a separate vehicle for proper disposal as medical waste, either to a CVWTF or a waste to energy plant, where it is then either incinerated, auto claved, sterilized for shredding and recycling, or burned to produce energy. Quantification and tracking. The movement of COVID 19 waste needed to be carried out by all quarantine centers through the CPCB's biomedical waste tracking mobile application called COVID 19 BWN. Role of nodal authorities. Designated trained nodal officers for biomedical waste management in hospitals must be made responsible for training waste handlers about infection prevention measures. Regarding record maintenance and monitoring, maintain and update biomedical waste management register and record for operation of incineration, hydro or autoclaving. Also, review and monitor the activities related to biomedical waste management through committees. Establish GPS and barcoding facility at common biomedical waste treatment facility. The center should incentivize startups and small and medium enterprises offering solutions for COVID 19 waste segregation and treatment. There should be constant and regular monitoring by the central and state PCBs, health departments in the state or union territories, and by the high level risk team at central level with further coordination by CPCB. Explain how AI is changing the technology perspective from learning to jobs under COVID 19. The COVID 19 pandemic has brought automation technologies to the forefront. An intelligent automation market in India is estimated to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 55%, with large enterprises expected to spend nearly 340 to $350 million in AI capabilities in 2024. What's the role of artificial intelligence in changing technology perspective? IBM's Global AI Adoption Index 2021 revealed that while AI adoption was flat over the last year, momentum is shifting as the need for AI has been accelerated by changing business needs due to the global COVID 19 pandemic. The different roles played by AI during a pandemics are early warning and alerts, prediction and detection of outbreak of diseases, real-time disease monitoring worldwide, analysis and visualization of spreading trends. It also aids in prediction of infection rate and infection trend, rapid decision making to identify the effective treatment, study and analysis of the pathogens, and drug discovery. All these are executed at a greater speed with AI. AI is already changing the way businesses operate today, and from how they communicate with their customers via virtual assistants to automating key workflows and even managing network security. Another recent IBM research revealed that more than half of CEOs expect AI to deliver tangible business benefits in the next few years. AI in learning and education can be used to dramatically change the learning experience online. Learning software is primarily designed to create more personalized learning experiences and help users discover new learning opportunities by combining learning content from different sources while recommending and delivering them with the support of AI across multiple digital touchpoints such as desktop applications and mobile learning apps. Colleges, universities, and enterprises are all looking at these tools instead of building training academics To help train people for new or expanded roles in an organization, enterprises will now target the front end of the recruiting funnel where higher education begins. The online faculty could be professors from shuttered university. Teachers can use AI to decipher what obstacles that a young student is facing, delivering micro interventions that help to bridge the reading skills gaps. New age AI softwares help assess reading fluency, pinpoint errors, and help improve those weaknesses. Pandemic has accelerated the use of artificial intelligence, especially by universities, companies which are now looking more remotely. It is only a matter of time that most businesses will leverage AI. India must ramp up skill development in this regard and align academia with the present day skill set in AI to build ample human capital. General studies for public civil service values and ethics in public administration, status and problems, ethical concerns and dilemmas in government and private institutions. So basically, this talks about ethical relations in effective utilization of public funds. So the public servants are the trustees of hard earned public funds. Therefore, it becomes their moral and legal responsibility for their effective utilization. Comment. So public money ought to be touched with most scrupulous consciousness of honor. It is not the produce of riches only, but of the hard earnings of labor and poverty. Efficient utilization of public funds is necessary for judicious use of financial resources to satisfy the needs of the present society in such a way that it doesn't compromise the capabilities of societies of future generations to meet their own needs. Four principles underpin trust in the public finances: transparency, assurances, accountability, and objectivity. And when it comes to objectivity, objectivity of policies based on accurate information and rigorous analysis. Accountability, decision makers are clearly identified and subject to strict rules and review of performance and outcomes. Assurance, figures and processes are checked by independent experts. Transparency, accurate records that show where money is raised and spent. Need for public servants to ensure effective utilization of public funds. It is vital to uphold the social contract. Citizens must be confident that they are protected by the law and that public institutions and servants will act in accordance with it. Public institutions with operational independence from political control are more likely to be trusted to act in the public interest. A well-informed population is far more likely to be confident about investing for the future. This means both providing appropriate information in ways that are accessible and easy to understand and educating citizens as well as inviting them to participate in decision making. Effective public financial management requires that the decision makers, citizens, and other stakeholders are able to follow the money, right? Or to see how taxes were raised, why decisions to spend it were made, how the money was actually spent, and what was bought. Where government plans and activities are measured against expected outcomes and outputs, citizens and other stakeholders will be able to judge the performance of the government. This in turn provides the basis for feedback and continuous improvement mechanisms. For the public to believe that public officials will do the right thing, a range of controls to promote integrity and ethical behavior and to tackle fraud and corruption are required. Most importantly, the public must believe that individuals will be held responsible for their actions no matter who they are. A climate of investment is carried when investors believe a state is stable, well run, and that political and fiscal risk will be managed effectively. Effective utilization of funds for welfare services is one of the key tenets to ensure social and economic justice and meet development goals. However, as our former Prime Minister had remarked, only 15 paise for every rupee spent on public welfare actually reaches to the masses, thereby highlighting the gravity of ineffective utilization of funds in our country. It is important for citizens to trust the government will act in their interest if they are to invest their own private resources and so create economic activity and employment. Efficient utilization of public funds requires a number of reforms for good governance, such as decentralization of power, plugging legislative loopholes, strengthening the public institutions like CBC and RTI, enhancing administrative accountability, making society more democratic. These reforms could make society more sustainable in the long run.